They say every neighborhood has one person who believes the rules don't apply to them. In Redwood Crest, that person was my neighbor, Kara Milton. She wasn't content with manicured lawns or committee meetings. She believed every driveway, every mailbox, even my brand new EV charger belonged to her version of the community. The first time I caught her SUV siphoning power from my charger, I thought it was a mistake. By the second time, I realized it was war. What Kara didn't know was that my career in cybersecurity had trained me to build traps, silent, patient systems designed to expose intruders. She thought she was stealing electricity. What she really did was trigger a chain of events that would unravel the entire HOA from the inside out. Before I dive into this story, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your location and local time. I love seeing how far our community of viewers stretches across the globe. The night it all began, I had just pulled into my driveway after a 14-hour day at the firm. My job wasn't glamorous, buried in code tracing digital footprints of criminals who believed they were invisible. I thrived on exposing patterns on building traps so subtle that by the time an intruder realized they were caught, it was already too late. That night, I only wanted a glass of bourbon, the quiet hum of my car recharging, and a few hours of silence. But silence was not what I found. The high-end charging unit I had personally installed glowed faint green, its cable slithering across the driveway like a black serpent. At the other end wasn't my graphite sedan, but a pearl-white SUV, its polished hood reflecting the porch light like a mirror. For a moment, my tired brain didn't process it. My wife Lena usually parked in that space. Instead, this stranger's vehicle sat smugly in her spot, tethered to the charger I'd spent a weekend wiring into my home's panel. I killed the engine and sat in disbelief. My neighborhood, Redwood Crest, was supposed to be a sanctuary of unspoken order. Residents fought over lawn heights, hedge symmetry, and the color of mailboxes, but never over blatant theft. Yet here was someone stealing power right from my property, as if my driveway was a public charging station. The slow burn began in my chest, creeping upward. I stepped out, the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes sharp in the suburban quiet. My eyes drifted across the street, and that's when I saw her. Kara Milton. She was in her late 40s, athletic gear that screamed designer stitched to her frame, dragging a giant inflatable flamingo across her lawn. A severe blonde bob framed her face like a helmet sharpened to a blade. She noticed me, hand frozen on the flamingo's neck, her posture exuding the air of a woman inconvenienced by my very existence. I called across the street, forcing a polite tone. "Excuse me, I think your SUV is plugged into my charger." Kara's eyes flickered with recognition but not guilt. She released the flamingo, letting it flop to one side, and strode over without hesitation. Her sneakers barely whispered against the asphalt, yet her presence filled the night. "That's yours?" she asked, nodding at the charger as if she were pointing to a street lamp. "Yes. Installed last month. It's connected to my private panel." "Well, that's wonderful," she replied sweetly, resting a hand on the SUV's hood like it was a prize thoroughbred. "Finally, someone in this neighborhood contributing to green infrastructure. We all need to do our part for the planet." I blinked. Her words didn't land as gratitude. They landed as entitlement. "This isn't public infrastructure," I said evenly. "It's my home charger, bought and paid for." She tilted her head, the saccharine smile failing to reach her eyes. "Oh, come on. Your car wasn't even using it. Why let perfectly good energy go to waste? Think of it as community sharing." My jaw tightened. Community sharing. It was theft, plain and simple. "I need to charge my own car," I told her, voice lower now. "I have an early meeting, 2 hours away." Kara sighed theatrically as if I had asked her to surrender a kidney. "Fine." She pressed her key fob, the charging handle clicking free. She yanked the cable loose and let it drop with a loud thud onto the concrete. Without another word, she climbed into her SUV and reversed out, leaving a faint black tire mark across the pavers I had scrubbed clean just that morning. The driveway was mine again, but the violation lingered like a stain. When I walked inside, Lena looked up from the kitchen island where she was scrolling on her tablet. "You're late," she said. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then forced a laugh. "Neighbor borrowed the charger. Mistakenly." She raised an eyebrow. "Borrowed. It won't happen again," I assured her, though even as I said it, I wasn't convinced. For a few days I let myself believe it was over. Maybe Kara was simply eccentric. Redwood Crest had its share of oddballs, retirees who measured lawn growth with rulers, hobbyists who fought over bird feeders, self-appointed watchdogs peering through blinds. But deep down I knew Kara was different. There was something calculated in her indifference, a brazenness that didn't come from ignorance but from conviction. And I was right. 3 nights later, Lena and I returned from dinner. The first thing I saw was the gleam of headlights bouncing off my garage door. The white SUV sat squarely in my driveway, again, charger cable locked tight into its side. Worse this time, it was parked directly behind my sedan, trapping me inside. Lena's breath hitched. "You've got to be kidding me." The slow burn reignited hotter this time. "She's testing me." I stormed across the street, Lena trailing, and pounded on Kara's ornate front door. The one who opened it wasn't Kara, but her husband Ben. He looked worn down, his posture sagging as if every conversation in his house was a battle he'd already lost. "Oh, hello," he said nervously. "Everything okay?" "No, Ben, it's not," I snapped, jerking a thumb over my shoulder. "Your wife has blocked my garage and is using my charger again." Ben's face fell. She said, "You'd work something out. A sharing arrangement." My laugh was sharp, humorless. The arrangement was that she stays off my property. And then Kara appeared behind him, dish towel in hand, her expression one of irritation rather than shame. "What's the shouting about?" she asked, stepping forward. "You've trapped my car in my own garage," I barked. "I could have an emergency." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she scoffed, brushing past Ben. "It's just a top-up, an hour maybe. If you really needed me to move, you could have asked nicely." "That's not how this works," Lena interjected, arms folded tight. "This is theft. It's trespassing. It's illegal." Kara's eyes narrowed into slits. "Don't you dare lecture me on legality. We're neighbors. We share. That's how communities survive." She gestured broadly at the street, then back to me with a smirk. "Or are you one of those selfish types who thinks everything behind your little gate is sacred?" I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. This wasn't ignorance, it was ideology, her twisted vision of collective ownership. And in her world, boundaries didn't exist. I stared into her cold, challenging eyes and realized something crucial. Kara believed there would never be consequences. That I would fume, maybe threaten, but ultimately yield. She thought civility was weakness. But she had just picked the wrong man to test. The night after Kara blocked my garage, sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every smirk, every dismissive shrug she had thrown at me. She believed she was untouchable. She believed rules were for other people. And worse, she believed the HOA was her shield. By morning, the neighborhood was already buzzing. Redwood Crest had its grapevine retirees, walking dogs at dawn, women clustered at the community gym and the ever-churning Facebook group. A post had already gone up, EV drama across Willow Lane last night. Who's hogging the charger? The comments dripped with speculation, sarcasm, and thinly veiled judgment. I didn't need to guess who had posted it. Kara thrived on controlling narratives. I left early for work, but as I pulled out of the garage, I saw her standing by her SUV, phone in hand, chatting animatedly with two neighbors. She made sure to wave at me, smile wide and artificial like a politician campaigning on someone else's lawn. The implication was clear: she wasn't embarrassed, she was emboldened. When I came home that evening, Lena was waiting, arms crossed. "We need to talk," she said, and pointed at the kitchen counter. There, in cream-colored envelopes, embossed with the HOA crest, lay 2 violation notices. I tore one open. Violation of Bylaw 7.4. C. Unapproved aesthetic modifications. It demanded we repaint our navy blue door to an approved shade within 14 days, or face fines of $100 per day. The second was more absurd. Violation of Landscaping Code 3.1, non-earth toned garden hose holder. Our simple dark green hose reel was apparently unacceptable. Lena's voice was taut with anger. "These are Kara's doing. Who else would report us?" I didn't argue. The timing was too perfect. Block my driveway one night, hit me with official paperwork the next. She had escalated the battle from my driveway to the HOA's rulebook. "This isn't about the door or the hose," I muttered. "It's about leverage. She wants to drown us in paperwork until we break." Lena's eyes hardened. Then we fight back. The HOA met once a month in the community clubhouse, a sterile room with fold-up chairs and the faint smell of chlorine from the adjacent indoor pool. By the time I arrived clutching the 2 violation notices, the place was half full, mostly older residents who looked like they'd been dragged away from their televisions. At the head table sat 3 board members: Roderick Hale, the HOA president, with slick-back silver hair and a perpetual condescending smile; Marjorie Kent, the treasurer, spectacles perched on her nose like a hawk ready to swoop; and a much younger man, Darren, who looked like he'd been bullied into volunteering. And there in the front row was Kara, notepad in hand, pretending to be the concerned citizen. She looked up as I entered and flashed that same smug smirk. When the floor opened for resident concerns, I stood. I received 2 violation notices this week. I began holding up the papers. one for my front door, one for a hose holder. The door was the same color when we bought the house. And I have photos of at least 15 other homes with non-standard door colors. Roderick didn't even glance at my evidence. He steepled his fingers. Mr. Cole, violations are violations. The fact that others may also be in violation does not negate your responsibility. With respect, I countered, my voice tight. This shows selective enforcement. I'm being targeted. The board acts only on formal complaints, he replied smoothly. We received a complaint about your property. We are obligated to act. Kara raised her hand like a model student. If I may, she said, rising to her feet. I filed the complaint. This isn't personal. It's about maintaining our neighborhood's harmony. Property values depend on consistency. We all need to sacrifice a little for the good of the community. The room murmured approval. Roderick nodded, clearly pleased. The fix was in. I clenched my jaw. This isn't about harmony. This is retaliation. I stopped you from using my private charger. Now you're weaponizing the bylaws. The room went silent. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Others avoided eye contact. Roderick's smile thinned. Mr. Cole, this is not the place for personal disputes. The board has reviewed your violations. They stand. You have 10 days before fines commence. He tapped the gavel. Next item. I stood there, humiliated, dismissed in front of my neighbors. Kara smirked openly, scribbling in her notepad like she was writing my obituary. On the drive home, Lena said nothing, but I saw the frustration etched on her face. When we parked, she finally whispered, maybe we should just repaint. Replace the hose reel. Keep the peace. For a moment I considered it. But then I thought of Kara's SUV in my driveway, of her smug wave that morning, of Roderick's smug dismissal. No, capitulation would only embolden them. That night I sat at my desk, the violation notices spread before me like a tarot reading of a doomed future. I thought of how I approach cyber threats. You don't just patch one vulnerability. You don't just fight one hacker. You audit the whole system. You find every weakness, every exploit. I pulled up the HOA's website, downloaded the full covenants, conditions, and restrictions, a dense 300-page PDF nobody but lawyers ever read. I poured myself a glass of scotch and started reading line by line. Fence heights, mailbox, paint requirements, approved tree species. A labyrinth of rules most residents had long since ignored. As I highlighted clauses and cross-referenced county plat maps, a realization dawned on me like a thunderclap. The entire neighborhood was a minefield of violations. Half the basketball hoops weren't transparent acrylic. Several driveways violated setback requirements. Kara's brand new slate driveway extension, almost certainly illegal. The board and Kara had shown me their weapon. Now I was going to turn it against them. By dawn, I had a spreadsheet filled with entries. Column A, bylaw number. Column B, requirement. Column C, likely violation. Column D, penalty. The list grew by the hour. Dozens of violations. Hundreds. Every home, including Kara's and Roderick's, was guilty of something. I leaned back, exhaustion and grim satisfaction washing over me. They thought they could bury me under paperwork. They had no idea I was about to bury the entire HOA under its own rulebook. And this time, it wouldn't be Kara smirking at a meeting. It would be me standing with every neighbor who suddenly realized they too were in the crosshairs. The war had escalated, but the battlefield was mine. The next 3 days of my life blurred into a haze of glowing screens, endless documents, and the quiet fury of a man who had been pushed too far. I didn't eat much, I didn't sleep much. Lena would pad into my office at midnight with a plate of food or a cup of coffee, but most of the time the dishes sat untouched while I scrolled, highlighted, and cross-referenced. The CC and Rs of Redwood Crest were a labyrinth, written by long-dead lawyers who had clearly never intended for anyone to actually read them. Clauses stacked upon subclauses like Russian dolls, each one more obscure than the last. But this was my battlefield. I had spent years in cybersecurity, learning to parse lines of code to find the one vulnerability hidden in thousands of clean commands. To me, this wasn't legalese, it was source code. And the system was riddled with bugs. By the end of the second night, my spreadsheet had ballooned to over 100 entries. Roderick's pristine lawn ornaments violated Section 5.9 on unapproved decorative installations. Marjorie the treasurer's front porch awning unpermitted modification in breach of setback clause 12.2. And Kara's brand new slate driveway extension, the one she flaunted like a trophy slam dunk violation of the drainage and setback code, which required 3 feet of clearance from property lines. She had less than 2. I didn't stop there. I subscribed to the county plat map server, pulled up property line records, and even dug through Google Earth's historical satellite imagery to show when sheds had appeared or patios had mysteriously doubled in size. I wrote scripts to scan the bylaws for every mention of measurable restrictions, heights, widths, distances, dates, and flagged them against what I could see on the ground. The results were devastating. Nearly every house in Redwood Crest was non-compliant with something. The bylaws weren't a shield, they were a minefield, and everyone was standing on explosives without realizing it. On the morning of the fourth day, I sat back in my chair, rubbing my bloodshot eyes. Lena came in bleary from lack of sleep herself. She looked at the mountains of paper and my glowing monitors. So she said softly, "What now?" "You've got their secrets. What do you do with them?" I exhaled slowly. "I build a trap." Saturday evening, I sent a courier to the home of Roderick Hale, HOA president, with a thick, spiral-bound report. On the cover, Redwood Crest Compliance Audit, prepared by Ethan Cole. It wasn't just a spreadsheet anymore. It was a professional-grade document with an executive summary, detailed appendices, photographs, timestamps, even citations from county codes. I made sure it looked official, clinical, and utterly unassailable. At the same time, I printed 200 single-page summaries, neatly formatted plain language, and under cover of night, Lena and I walked the neighborhood, slipping one into every mailbox. The summary was simple. A recent audit has revealed over 200 unaddressed bylaw violations in Redwood Crest. Current enforcement targets less than 2% of these violations. The attached full report has been delivered to the HOA board. By Sunday morning, the neighborhood was on fire. The Facebook group exploded. People panicked over their basketball hoops, their mailbox paint, the unapproved pergolas in their backyards. Panic turned quickly to anger. If I was being fined for a Navy door, why wasn't half the street being fined for their own infractions? The narrative Kara had tried to spin, that I was selfish, entitled, unwilling to share, crumbled overnight. Now the HOA itself was under siege. On Monday, Roderick called an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. By the time Lena and I arrived, every folding chair was taken, and residents stood 3 deep against the walls. The air buzzed with nervous energy, the kind you feel before a riot or a revolution. At the head table, Roderick looked pale, the silver polish of his hair unable to disguise the sweat beading his temples. Marjorie sat stiff, lips pressed in a thin, disapproving line. Darren looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And there, front row center, was Kara, her smirk gone, her jaw set, like she was preparing for battle. Roderick opened the meeting, voice strained. "As you all know, Mr. Cole has circulated an unauthorized biased report. It is an attempt to sow discord and chaos in our community. I assure you the board will review these so-called violations." "Is it accurate?" a voice shouted from the back. It was George Peterson, the elderly retiree known for his garden gnomes. He held up a crumpled copy of my summary. "Because this says my gnome is a violation. Do I need to ship him off tonight, or what?" Laughter rippled through the room, followed by angry murmurs. Roderick slammed his gavel, but the sound was swallowed by voices rising from every corner. People wanted answers. That was my cue. I rose slowly, holding one of the spiral-bound reports. The room hushed as I stepped forward. "This is not chaos," I said clearly, letting my voice carry. "This is transparency. For weeks, my family has been targeted with selective enforcement violations for things that half this neighborhood also has. When I looked deeper, I discovered the truth. Almost everyone here is in violation of something. You've been living under a sword you didn't even know was hanging above you. The rules haven't been applied equally, they've been weaponized." Kara shot to her feet. "Lies? You're just bitter because you don't like following rules. You think you're above the HOA." I turned to her, voice calm, almost surgical. "No, Kara. I'm the only one who actually read the rules, and according to those rules, your driveway alone violates 3 separate clauses." Her face drained of color, but I didn't let the silence linger. I placed the heavy report on the head table with a loud thud. "So here are my motions. 1, community amnesty. All existing violations are forgiven, and we start fresh. 2, a motion of no confidence in President Hale. And 3, a bylaw review committee made of residents, not tyrants, to bring this neighborhood into the 21st century. The effect was electric. Hands shot up across the room. Voices shouted support. George yelled, "I second it." Others joined, demanding a vote. Roderick sputtered, slamming the gavel again and again, but the sound was drowned out by the roar of the very people he once ruled over. I looked at Lena, her eyes shining with both pride and disbelief. The trap had sprung not on Kara's SUV this time, but on the entire rotten structure that had sheltered her arrogance. And in that moment, I realized the war had shifted. It was no longer me against Kara. It was the neighborhood against the very system she had manipulated. The clubhouse that night felt less like a neighborhood meeting and more like a courtroom ready for mutiny. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above, casting pale shadows across the folding chairs, but it was the tension that hummed the loudest. Every resident had shown up. Some clutched my summary sheet like it was a subpoena, others whispered to their spouses with quick, nervous glances. It was no longer just about me. It was about all of us. Roderick gripped his gavel like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. "This meeting is out of order," he barked, though his voice trembled. "Mr. Cole's so-called audit is malicious, biased, and not recognized by this board." The crowd didn't care. A man in the back shouted, "Biased or not, are the violations real?" Others joined in demanding answers. The carefully cultivated silence of Redwood Crest, the unspoken agreement that no one rocked the boat, was collapsing. I raised my hand and the room stilled. "The violations are real," I said, holding up a copy of my thick report. "Every entry is documented with photographs, bylaw citations, and even county records. If anyone doubts me, I'll gladly share the digital files." Murmurs rippled. I saw phones being pulled out, neighbors whispering about their basketball hoops, about their unapproved rose gardens, about their patio extensions built without permits. Roderick slammed his gavel. "Order. The board will review these claims in due course. Until then, you are to respect the authority vested in..." Authority? George Peterson interrupted, his voice surprisingly strong for a man in his 70s. He pointed at Roderick with a trembling hand. Where was that authority when Kara parked her SUV in Ethan's driveway? Where was it when neighbors were threatened with fines for flags while your own porch canopy violates setback codes? The room erupted. Kara shot to her feet, face flushed crimson. "This is ridiculous. Ethan is twisting the rules, weaponizing them. He's dangerous." I turned slowly, meeting her glare. "No, Kara, I'm holding up a mirror. You don't like the reflection." The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel strike. She sank back into her seat, lips pressed, thin eyes darting as if searching for an escape route. I cleared my throat. "I repeat my motions. Community-wide amnesty, immediate removal of President Hale, and formation of a resident-led bylaw review committee. If we enforce every rule to the letter, we all suffer. But if we admit the truth that these bylaws are outdated, selectively applied, and abused, we can start fresh." Together, hands shot up across the room. The call for a vote thundered through the air. Roderick's face crumpled. "You can't just..." But the tide had turned. Neighbors, long silent, were emboldened. Voices shouted, seconded, all in favor. The roar was undeniable. Within minutes, the vote passed. Roderick's gavel fell limp against the table. His silvered hair seemed to wilt with him as he realized his kingdom was gone. The man who once ruled with smug authority was now a relic, ousted by the very rules he had brandished like a cudgel. Beside him, Marjorie looked stunned, her hawk-like glare faltering into bewilderment. Darren, the reluctant board member, actually sighed in relief, as if a weight had been lifted. And then there was Kara. She sat rigid, pale beneath the fluorescent lights, her nails digging into the notepad she had once wielded like a sword. For years she had hidden behind the HOA, filing complaints, policing neighbors, dictating with a smile that never reached her eyes. Now the shield was gone. The amnesty was unanimous. Violations forgiven. The door to my house could remain navy blue. George's garden gnome could stand proudly in his mulch. The hose reel, the flags, the hedges all wiped clean. And in that sweeping motion, Kara's arsenal vanished. When the meeting adjourned, the crowd spilled into the cool night air, buzzing with relief. Neighbors clustered around me, clapping my shoulder, thanking me. For once, I wasn't the outcast or the target. I was the man who had turned the weapon back on its wielder. Lena squeezed my hand, her smile, tired but proud. "You actually did it," she whispered. But as the residents dispersed, I noticed Kara lingering near the clubhouse, steps her husband Ben hovering helplessly at her side. She didn't approach me, didn't speak, but her eyes locked on mine with a cold fire, a promise that she wasn't done. I knew that look. This battle was won. But the war wasn't over. The following week felt strangely calm. The violation notices stopped. Neighbors who once avoided me now waved when I walked by. Someone even left a thank you card in our mailbox, signed simply from a grateful family. But I also knew Kara wasn't one to accept defeat. I was proven right on Friday morning, when Lena opened the mail and froze. In her hands was a new envelope, not from the HOA, but from the County Code Enforcement Office. She read aloud, voice tight, "Notice of complaint. Subject property allegedly in violation of municipal ordinance regarding outdoor security cameras. Investigation pending." My stomach turned. Cameras, of course. Kara couldn't use the HOA anymore, so she had gone to the county. Lena's eyes met mine. She's not stopping. I exhaled slowly, my anger sharpening into cold clarity. No, she's escalating. And with that realization, I knew the trap I'd built wasn't the endgame. It was only the beginning of a larger war, one that would pull in more than just the HOA. Because if Kara wanted to play with official agencies, with county inspectors and municipal codes, then she had just opened a door I was more than ready to walk through. After all, my traps didn't only exist on paper. They could exist in systems and networks in the very bureaucracies Kara thought she could bend to her will. The battlefield was shifting again, and I was ready. When that county notice landed in my hands, I knew Kara had crossed a new threshold. This was no longer about petty neighborhood drama. She had reached outside Redwood Crest, dragging government bureaucracy into her crusade. It was bold, reckless, and very, very stupid. The letter alleged that my security cameras might violate municipal code, citing possible improper placement and surveillance of neighboring property. I laughed out loud. Every suburban home in Redwood Crest had cameras, Ring doorbells, or motion lights. If mine were a violation, then half the block was guilty too. But I understood Kara's strategy. She wanted to bury me under red tape, force me into constant defense, bleed my time and resources until I snapped. She had underestimated me again. That night I pulled up my servers, reviewing weeks of stored footage. I didn't just have video of her SUV stealing my charger. I had footage of Kara walking across my property with a tape measure, creeping into my flower beds to measure hose reels and flagpoles, jotting notes in her little pad like a dictator's spy. If she wanted to play with official channels, I would give them evidence that painted her as the trespasser, the stalker, the nuisance. But I didn't stop there. I went deeper. Municipal codes were online, buried in PDFs, just like the HOA's, CC, and ours. I dug into Redwood County's building ordinances, setback laws, even stormwater management rules. I discovered something almost poetic. Kara's slate driveway extension, the one that let her precious SUV fit perfectly across from my house, violated county regulations even more severely than HOA bylaws. The runoff from her pavement wasn't just bending a neighborhood rule, it was channeling water directly into her neighbor's yard, eroding soil into George Peterson's prize-winning rose garden. George, as it turned out, was not just a retiree with too much time on his hands. He had been a county surveyor for 30 years. The kind of man who lived for lines on maps and measurements in inches. If Kara wanted to bring in the county, I would bring in George. Saturday morning, I walked down Willow Lane, report folder under my arm. George was trimming hedges, his old dog lounging lazily by his feet. When he saw me, he straightened his weathered face, breaking into a grin. "Morning, Ethan. I was hoping you'd stop by," he said. "Heard you gave them hell at the meeting." I handed him the folder. "I think you'll find this interesting." He opened it, scanning the photos and plat maps. His brows arched. "She paved over the setback line." 2 feet over, I confirmed. "And her runoff flows straight into your roses. Municipal Code 18, 4C. It's a clear violation." George chuckled low and satisfied. "Well, I'll be damned. Guess she picked the wrong surveyor to annoy." "Would you be willing to file a complaint?" I asked. George didn't hesitate. "Gladly. And I'll file it with measurements so clean they'll hang her driveway like a noose." Meanwhile, Lena kept reminding me to stay calm. "You're getting obsessed," she warned, sipping coffee one night. "What if this spirals? What if she pulls you into court?" I met her gaze. "Then I'll win there too." Kara believes bureaucracy is her weapon. She doesn't understand it's my specialty. By midweek, county inspectors were crawling over Kara's property with clipboards and measuring wheels. From my office window, I watched her storm outside, hands on her hips, barking at them. Ben trailed helplessly behind, trying to calm her. But the inspectors were unmoved. George had filed his complaint with surgical precision, backed by 50 years of expertise. 2 days later, Kara received her own cream-colored envelope, not from the HOA, but from the county. A notice of violation, mandatory removal of her illegal driveway extension within 30 days or face escalating fines. The irony was delicious. The very system she tried to weaponize against me had turned on her. But I wasn't celebrating just yet, because Kara wasn't the kind of woman to surrender gracefully. The retaliation came faster than expected. At 3 in the morning, our doorbell camera captured Kara standing at the edge of my driveway hood, pulled low, phone in hand. She took photos, my car, my house, even Lena's flower beds. I watched the footage live from my phone, my fists clenched. She was documenting, preparing her next strike. Lena stirred awake when she heard me pacing. "She's outside again." I nodded, jaw tight. "She's trying to build a case. But she doesn't realize every step she takes is being recorded. Every move adds to my evidence. By dawn, I had already compiled a new report, timestamps, screenshots, video clips. It was no longer just about bylaws or municipal codes. Kara was crossing into harassment and stalking territory. I called my attorney a sharp-tongued woman named Rachel Myers, who specialized in property disputes. She reviewed the footage and whistled softly. "You've got her. Trespass, harassment, even potential criminal mischief. If she keeps this up, we can get a restraining order." "Do it," I said. Rachel leaned back, smiling. "Mr. Cole, you're turning her own tactics into a fortress. She's going to hang herself with the rope she keeps tugging." The next HOA meeting was chaos. Though Roderick had resigned, Kara still showed up, trying to sway the room. She stood voice shaking with outrage. "This man is dangerous. He spies on neighbors. He harasses us with paperwork. Enough." George interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "Kara, you paved your driveway illegally and flooded my roses. The county ruled against you. Don't try to paint yourself as the victim." Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Even Ben, slumped in the back, looked away, shame etched into his face. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. The weight of evidence spoke louder than any words. For the first time since the battle began, Kara looked small. Her power, her influence, her smug confidence, it all cracked beneath the pressure of the very system she had unleashed. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't over. People like Kara didn't quit. They regrouped, schemed, and waited for the next opening. And so I prepared. I tightened my defenses, updated my traps, fortified every angle, because Kara had taught me one lesson better than any textbook ever could. A war of attrition isn't won in one battle. It's won by being the last one standing. The weeks following the county's ruling against Kara were some of the strangest days I'd ever lived through in Redwood Crest. On the surface, the neighborhood seemed calm. Driveways were quiet lawns, trimmed mailboxes freshly painted. But beneath that veneer, tension bubbled like an underground fault line ready to crack. Kara had gone silent, at least publicly. Her SUV no longer appeared in my driveway. She avoided me on the street, though sometimes I'd catch her peering through her blinds, notebook still clutched in her hand. Silence wasn't peace, it was plotting. I knew better than to believe she was finished. Sure enough, new cream-colored envelopes started appearing in mailboxes up and down the block. But this time they weren't directed only at me. They were aimed at everyone. The McDaniels got hit for their basketball hoop, the Wines for their backyard pergola. Even George, who had been the loudest against her, received a violation notice, claiming his rose trellises exceeded maximum fence height. The signatures were forged under the acting board secretary line. Kara's handwriting was impossible to miss. She wasn't a board member anymore, but she was pretending to be one, weaponizing old templates and official letterhead like a counterfeit queen. Neighbors knocked on my door, envelopes in hand, demanding answers. "Is this legit?" they asked. "Do we really have to tear down our decks?" I studied the papers and shook my head. No, these aren't valid. The board has already changed leadership. She's bluffing. But fear was contagious. People had lived so long under the HOA's petty tyranny that even the suggestion of fines made them panic. And that panic was Kara's real weapon. Lena watched me pacing one night as I pieced through the fraudulent notices. "So what's the plan?" she asked. I stopped staring at the stack of envelopes. "The plan," I said slowly, "is to expose her. Not just to the neighbors, but to everyone. Publicly. If she wants to play fake authority, then I'll drag her into the light where authority actually matters." I filed a report with the county's fraud division, attaching scans of Kara's fake letters alongside genuine board documents. Rachel, my attorney, sent a cease and desist letter directly to Kara, citing potential criminal impersonation and mail fraud. But I didn't stop there. I drafted a second neighborhood-wide summary, just like before. Plain language, direct. Fraudulent violation notices have been circulated. They are not valid. They were not issued by the HOA board. Evidence of forgery has been sent to county authorities. I ended with one line: "In bold, fear is her weapon. Knowledge is ours." On a chilly Sunday morning, Lena and I walked the neighborhood again, slipping the summaries into mailboxes. By evening, the community Facebook group was ablaze. Neighbors were furious, not at me this time, but at Kara. For once, the tide of public opinion was not just turning, it was crashing down on her. The next week, the HOA's first resident-led bylaw review committee convened. The clubhouse was packed once again, but the atmosphere was different, less fearful, more determined. George sat at the front as chair, his stack of papers towering beside him. For the first time in Redwood Crest's history, people weren't there to defend themselves against violations. They were there to rewrite the rules. I sat near the back content to watch. I'd set the fire, but now the neighborhood carried the torch. Proposals flew, relaxing color restrictions, eliminating fines for minor decorative changes, abolishing archaic clauses about flag sizes and hose reels. It was democracy in action, messy and loud but genuine. And through it all, Kara sat alone in the corner, silent, arms crossed. She had no seat at the table anymore, no power, until she stood up. "This is chaos," she snapped, her voice slicing through the chatter. "Without strict enforcement, this neighborhood will fall apart. Property values will plummet. People will paint their doors neon pink plant weeds instead of flowers. Do you want Redwood Crest to become a slum?" A younger neighbor, a father of 3, turned in his chair and said what everyone was thinking. "We'd rather risk pink doors than live under your dictatorship, Kara." The room erupted in applause. For the first time since this began, Kara didn't have a comeback. She sat down, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped her notepad. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. That night, as Lena and I sat on our porch with coffee headlights swept across the street, a delivery truck idled in front of Kara's house. Workers unloaded large wooden crates, stamped with a foreign manufacturer's logo. From the distance, I couldn't make out what they were. Lena frowned. "What is she up to now?" I watched in silence as the crates disappeared into her garage. Whatever it wasn't lawn furniture. It was something else, something she wasn't ready to show yet. I tightened my grip on my mug. She's not finished. She's planning something bigger. And as the night deepened, I realized the war was about to escalate again, beyond HOA rules, beyond county codes, into something none of us were prepared for. The trap I'd set had dismantled her influence. But Kara wasn't the type to retreat quietly. She was preparing a counterstrike, and I needed to be ready. Because in wars of attrition, silence was never peace. It was the drumbeat before the next attack. The crates stayed in Kara's garage for nearly a week, and that silence gnawed at me. Every night I'd sit by the window, lights off, watching for movement. Sometimes I'd see her SUV pull in late, headlights off, as though she didn't want anyone to notice. Other nights her husband Ben would step outside for a cigarette, shoulders, slumped eyes hollow. Whatever Kara was planning, he didn't look like a willing partner, he looked like a hostage to her obsession. Then, on a windy Thursday evening, I finally found out what was inside. I was reviewing camera footage in my office when one of my perimeter alerts pinged. I switched to the live feed, and there it was, Kara dragging one of the crates open in her driveway. Inside gleamed stacks of metal posts, reflective signs, and even a portable security booth, the kind you might see in a parking garage. Lena leaned over my shoulder, eyes wide. What the hell is she doing? The answer hit me like a slap. Kara wasn't retreating from the HOA's collapse, she was building her own. A shadow HOA. Her signs were emblazoned with phrases like community watch zone and resident security checkpoint. She was planning to intimidate neighbors with faux authority, complete with barricades and surveillance. "She's gone completely off the rails," I muttered. The next morning, Redwood Crest woke up to a new nightmare. Metal posts had been planted at the ends of Willow Lane, reflective signs bolted in place. A makeshift booth stood near Kara's driveway, painted in bold letters, "Neighborhood Security, authorized by concerned residents." Of course, no such authorization existed, but fear is a powerful drug. By noon, whispers spread. Was this legal? Did the county approve it? Would there be checkpoints at the entrances to the subdivision? Neighbors stopped me on my walk with Lena, their voices trembling. "Ethan, can she really do this?" one asked. I shook my head. Absolutely not. This is fraud. She's impersonating authority again. And this time she's not just harassing us individually, she's intimidating the whole block. That night, the committee gathered in George's living room. The air was thick with anger and disbelief. Parents worried about their kids being stopped while riding bikes. Elderly residents feared fines or harassment just for stepping outside. George slammed his fist on the coffee table. "This is it. Enough is enough. We took the HOA back, we rewrote the bylaws, and now she thinks she can set up her own police state. No more." Rachel, my attorney, joined via speakerphone. Her voice cut sharp and clear. "What Kara has erected is an unauthorized structure on public easement. That's a direct violation of county law. If you want, I can have an injunction filed by morning." But I raised a hand. Filing paperwork takes weeks. By then, she'll have already scared half the neighborhood into submission. We need to act faster and louder. "What are you thinking?" George asked. I leaned forward, voice steady. "We go public. Not just to the neighborhood, but to the county, to the press, if we have to. Kara's power has always relied on secrecy, on manipulating rules behind closed doors. We drag her schemes into the light and make her a spectacle. 2 days later, that spectacle unfolded. We organized a town hall in the clubhouse, inviting not just residents, but also a county inspector and a local journalist from the community paper. Word spread fast. By the time the meeting started, the room was overflowing. Cameras clicked, notepads filled, and tension buzzed like static in the air. Kara was there, of course. She stood near the front arms, folded a smug smile, plastered across her face as if she'd already won. Her SUV keys dangled from her manicured fingers, a casual symbol of her arrogance. I took the podium. Behind me, projected on the wall, was a slideshow of photographs, my footage of Kara, installing her fake signs, her booth, her unauthorized structures. Neighbors, I began, my voice steady, what you're looking at is not security, it's not community service, it's fraud. These signs, this booth, this entire charade, was erected without approval from the HOA, from the county, from anyone. It is intimidation, plain and simple. The inspector spoke next, confirming in clipped tones that the structures violated county codes. The journalist scribbled furiously. Whispers turned into outraged mutters. Kara snapped, stepping forward. This is for your safety. Someone has to maintain order. If the HOA won't enforce the rules, then I will. Her words backfired spectacularly. Parents shouted back, "We don't need you policing our kids." George rose, his voice booming. "You're not protecting us, Kara. You're terrorizing us." The journalist captured it all, her shrill protests, the neighbors' fury, the inspector's calm condemnation. By the time the meeting ended, Kara's illusion of authority had shattered. The county inspector handed her a written notice ordering the immediate removal of all unauthorized structures. The journalist promised a front-page story. As we left, Lena squeezed my arm. "You did it again," she whispered. But I shook my head. "No, the neighborhood did it. I just gave them the tools." The next morning, work crews arrived, not by Kara's choice, but by county order. They dismantled the booth, uprooted the posts, and loaded the fake signs into the back of a truck. Neighbors gathered on lawns, watching with quiet satisfaction. Some even cheered as the last sign was hauled away. Kara stood on her porch, face pale, lips tight. Ben lingered behind her, looking almost relieved. For once, she didn't shout, she didn't wave, she didn't smirk. She just watched as her empire crumbled piece by piece. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the end. But deep inside, I knew better. People like Kara didn't simply vanish when cornered. They retreated, waited, and struck from angles no one expected. And though I couldn't prove it yet, I had the distinct gnawing feeling that the biggest strike of all was still coming. For a few days after the county forced Kara to tear down her fake security booth, Redwood Crest felt almost normal again. Kids rode their bikes down Willow Lane without fear of being stopped. Neighbors worked in their gardens, chatting across hedges instead of glaring over them. Even the HOA committee meetings started to feel less like courtroom dramas and more like the messy but hopeful business of actual community. But I never let my guard down. Kara wasn't built to surrender. She had lost her grip on the HOA, lost her credibility with the county, and lost face in front of every single neighbor. For someone like her, humiliation wasn't an ending, it was a wound that demanded revenge. And sure enough, it came. It was a crisp Saturday morning when I heard the sound of heavy engines. I stepped onto my porch with my coffee, Lena joining me, and we both froze. A flatbed truck rumbled down the street and stopped in front of Kara's house. Workers hopped out, unloading pallets of bricks, rebar, and bags of cement. Behind them came another truck carrying jackhammers. George, walking his dog, stopped beside us. "Looks like she's rebuilding," he muttered darkly. Within an hour, the crew had started jackhammering her illegal driveway extension. At first, I thought Kara had finally accepted defeat, forced to demolish the project that had violated setback rules. But then I saw her standing in her doorway, face twisted in fury, as dust billowed around her. This wasn't voluntary compliance. This was enforcement. The county had followed through on George's complaint, and Kara was being forced to pay for the demolition herself. Neighbors gathered on their lawns, some filming, some whispering with grim satisfaction. The air shook with the pounding of jackhammers, each strike a public declaration of her downfall. Kara's SUV, usually gleaming in its spot, was now parked crookedly across the street, powerless and displaced. Lena leaned close to me, her voice low. "It's poetic, isn't it? She tried to weaponize the rules, and now the rules are tearing her world apart." I nodded, though. My eyes stayed fixed on Kara. She didn't look defeated. Not yet. Her fists were clenched at her sides, her lips moving in what looked like curses too quiet to hear. Even stripped of her power, she radiated defiance. By late afternoon, the extension was gone, reduced to rubble, loaded into dump trucks. The workers packed up the trucks, rumbled away, and Redwood Crest fell into an eerie silence. Kara stood alone in her driveway, staring at the raw dirt where her empire of arrogance had once stood. Ben appeared behind her, mumbling something, but she shrugged him off, retreating inside without a word. For the next week, Kara stayed out of sight. The SUV didn't move. Curtains stayed drawn. It was as if she had gone to ground licking her wounds. But then the neighborhood newspaper arrived. Front page headline: HOA tyrant's driveway demolished after county crackdown. The article laid it all out. Her forged violation notices, her unauthorized structures, her illegal driveway. It even quoted George and a few other neighbors, painting Kara as a bully who had finally been checked by her own tactics. My name wasn't mentioned, but I didn't need it to be. Everyone in Redwood Crest knew the truth. That was the final blow. Kara had lived for her reputation, for her illusion of authority. Now she was a pariah. On a cool autumn evening, Lena and I sat on our porch with mugs of tea. The navy blue door, once the subject of her petty crusade, glowed proudly under the porch light. Across the street, Kara's house looked dim and lifeless. No flamingos, no fake signs, no SUV gleaming in triumph, just silence. George strolled by, his dog tugging at the leash. He stopped, smiling wryly. "Justice is a beautiful thing, isn't it?" I chuckled. "Sometimes it takes a while, but yes." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You know, Kara's not just fighting us anymore. She's fighting herself. People like her, they always trip over their own pride eventually." As he walked away, I realized he was right. The trap I had built with code, bylaws, and paperwork had been effective. But the real trap, the one that ended her reign, was her own arrogance. She couldn't help herself. She had to push, to control, to dominate. And when the system finally turned back on her, she had nowhere to run. That night, I sat at my desk, sipping a glass of scotch. For the first time in months, my computer monitors were dark. No spreadsheets, no legal documents, no security feeds flashing red alerts. Just peace. Lena came in, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "You think it's finally over?" she asked. I paused, considering. With Kara, nothing is ever over. But the neighborhood is different now. People have seen what happens when one person abuses power. They won't let it happen again. She smiled softly. "Then maybe we can finally live like normal people." I laughed. Normal. After all this, I don't think normal exists anymore. But as I looked out the window at the quiet street, the freshly demolished driveway across the way, and my own door shining defiantly blue, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. Looking back, this war with Kara wasn't just about an EV charger, a driveway, or a set of ridiculous HOA bylaws. It was about boundaries, about what happens when someone believes rules exist only for others, not for themselves. Kara thought civility was weakness. She thought manipulation would shield her forever. But in the end, her arrogance became the very snare that trapped her. Life is full of people like Kara, neighbors, bosses, even friends who test your limits, who try to take more than they're entitled to. The lesson is simple: standing your ground matters. Not with rage, not with fists, but with persistence, truth, and the courage to shine a light where bullies thrive in darkness. So, if you've ever been pushed around by someone who thought they held all the cards, remember this story. Remember that traps don't always need wires or code. They can be made of patience, evidence, and community. And to you watching this right now, drop a comment below. Have you ever faced a Kara in your life? Tell me where you're watching from and share your story. And if you want to see more battles like this, don't forget to subscribe. Because in neighborhoods, as in life, the fight for respect is never just one person's story, it's all of ours.